Hello, everyone, and welcome to Team TSI's Expert Industry Training. We're so excited to have you, so thank you so much for your time today. We're going to be focusing on the enhanced enforcement penalties for infection control and citations. And you can imagine, we know that this is a really big topic right now, so I'm so excited to have the panel with us today. They've prepared a number of things for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and walk you through the GoToWebinar question and answer panel so you can ask those questions, and then we're going to turn it right over to our speakers. So if you see my slide, I have a couple of screenshots here, and many of you are familiar with the GoToWebinar panel, but just in case it's your first GoToWebinar, you should be looking for a panel that has a little rectangle with options in there. If you're not seeing this webinar panel with the options, then you may have collapsed it, or if you were doing work prior to us starting the training, it may have collapsed itself. So you can do a couple things. You can go to the bottom of your screen, click on the flower, and it will pop up the GoToWebinar panel. It will either be a small collapsed version, which you would simply click on the orange arrow, or it's going to be a larger version. You'll have a number of different options. Look for the one that says questions, and when you click on that questions arrow, it will look like my number 2 screenshot over here to the far right. That's where you're going to enter your question for our team. You'll hit send, and it will pop right up in the section that says questions appear here. The moment that that happens, we get an alert. We are monitoring your questions. If the team on the line can answer them via texting it back to you, we'll do that. And then if it's something that we believe the entire group would learn from, then we'll save it also to the end and we'll walk through your questions then. So I'm so excited to have your team with us today. We have a number of experts with Team TSI that are constantly doing behind the scenes work on presentations like today, but really it's the work behind the scenes that you, I'm sure, are not aware of. And this is the team that's really doing that for you. So I want to go ahead at this time and introduce Greg Seipel. He's our Team TSI's Vice President of Informatics. He's going to be walking us through some slides, and then he's going to turn it over to our other experts on the line today. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Di.
All right, so Greg, I'm not sure if you're on mute. Can you?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yep, I'm here. I thought
Okay.
it was off.
Hey,
My apologies.
no, actually, I kind of goofed, and I apologize. I was ready to pass it over to Greg, and I forgot about the rest of the team. So I'm sorry, everybody. We've got Hugh Heaton, which you're going to hear from in just a moment, and Greg does such a great job in introducing him that I did not want to take that away. But our other experts are Pat Newberry, Jill Pugh, and behind the scenes is my colleague Kelsey Little and myself, Dahlia Croft. So thank you for that, Greg. I'm sorry about that.
No worries at all. Okay, so do I have control? I'm so sorry. It's not letting me advance, Dahlia. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Dahlia. It's not allowing me to advance.
And I think we might be fighting for the keyboard. There we go. Try it now.
Ah, there we go. Okay, so much, everybody. Well, welcome to our lunch and learn session on enhanced enforcement penalties for infection control citations. And again, we have the honor of being joined by Hugh Heaton. As you know, many of you have attended these trainings in the past. Hugh is sort of an icon for the long-term care skilled nursing facility community. He's written countless policies and procedure manuals. If you're familiar with the Heaton manuals, then you're well familiar with his name and his work. And we're just very honored to come out regarding who's going to impose remedies in response to infection control citations. So the intent of this is that by the time we're completed with this, you will readily understand the two factors that are going to drive the penalties based on infection control citations, what those factors are and how they're going to be weighted. You're going to be able to understand the criteria, the penalties that are assessed for noncompliance, whether at a level D or E, whether it's gone to a level F, which we're hitting now into sort of the widespread G, H, or I, and of course J, K, or L when we're into immediate jeopardy and actual harm. And of course the remedies that are driving the imposition of remedies or penalties are certainly going to only go up, as the scope and severity rises as well. So the additional COVID-19 survey activities CMS is conducting, we're going to discuss that a little bit. And that's probably intimately familiar to all of us at this point. We're all sort of bleeding COVID-19 after all of this. And then, of course, the expanded survey activities and how CMS will prioritize the survey activities. What factors are going to be looking at for that as well. And then we have some handouts. There's going to be some information from handouts that are included. The purpose and the use of those, some tools that will help you sort of organize a root cause analysis that Hugh has put together that are absolutely wonderful and electronic as well. So that's just really an exciting offering that Hugh, out of the goodness of his heart, is providing. So in our background, we all know, infection control is not anything new. We all saw that when the ROP changes started to come out, phase 3 of the ROP, and the focus on antibiotic stewardship, infection preventionists, and infection control surveillance. Reporting requirements that have come under that, but boy, COVID-19 really pushed it center stage and really put it under the limelight. So we're really back under the microscope in response to the public health emergency, and in response to that, of course, they've issued additional information regarding how they're going to emphasize proper infection control in nursing facilities. So the memo that came out for the QSO letter in June really sort of detail the enhanced enforcement penalties that you're now going to face for deficiency citations specific to FCAG 880, infection prevention and control requirements. So they really are only applying at an F880 level. And again, Hugh's going to they're going to impose remedies for any deficiency associated with infection control at or above a level D. And the harshness is going to be based predominantly on two factors. It's basically two factors. Current and past compliance history relative to infection control deficiencies. How have you performed in the past? We all remember the report that came out at the height of the pandemic on the number of facilities from 2011 to 2014 or 2014 to 2017, stating that basically 87+% nursing homes had received an infection control citation, which makes it look like it's almost an epidemic type problem in skilled nursing facilities without really going into detail for it. But that past compliance, your survey history in response to infection control deficiencies, and of course, the scope and severity. Almost getting to the point where you'll remember when an immediate jeopardy unabated was a 23-day fast track. You might look fondly on that memory if you wind up in the unfortunate situation of being cited at a severe level for this as well. So Hugh has researched and investigated this. There's probably nobody more knowledgeable about this right now that's going to kind of walk you through these enforcement remedies, what you can come to expect, what you need to be prepared for. And having said that, Hugh, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg. That was informative. If Dahlia will give me the screen, we will be able to get us up and going. Technology is wonderful, helping us to, we have to do all this work. Okay, I hope my screen is up. Can everybody see that? Greg, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, I can.
Enforcement remedies. Okay. What we're looking at is what Greg has just talked about. We want to look at what the enforcement remedies are. and the severity of those. And again, these apply only to infection control, tag number F880. So if the facility has had no infection control citations in the last year or on the last standard survey, and the reason that CMS used that language, last year or last standard survey, the standard survey cycle is every 12 months or no later than 15 months. But since the COVID-19 or the public health emergency, that was suspended. So there's a lot of facilities that fall outside of the 15-month parameter. So what CMS has done with the QSO letter, they indicated in the last year or the last standard survey. So if we've had no deficiencies in the past, and on this survey we get a level D or E, the enforcement penalties will be a directed plan of correction, including the use of a root cause analysis. As we further into the session, we're going to review that particular requirement, the root cause analysis, in a little bit more detail. So level D or E on no past cited deficiencies is a directed plan of correction. Now, we know the directed plan of correction is exactly that. It's what the state agency tells us we're going to do to correct it, what training programs that we will attend. They will identify the training programs primarily on YouTube for you to review, and you will have to have some documentation that you actually went through that training program. And all of that is spelled out in the directed plan of correction, including the time frame for completing all of that. But if you're cited at a level F, the enhanced penalties will be a directed plan of correction and a discretionary denial of payment for new admissions. And you will have 45 days to demonstrate compliance. And the 45 days, the clock starts 5 days after you receive notice of the penalties. So you could say you have 50 days, but it has to be completed within that 45 days. Now, the directed plan of correction will have a date of compliance built into that, and you will have to do a plan of correction of well. But if you've had one deficiency in the last year, just one, the question comes up, what scope and severity level would apply from past survey? The instructions does not address that, but because these penalties are based on D or higher, I would assume that would be the same case for any citation from the past. It would have to be D or higher. So when we look at, you've had one infection control citation in the past. If you're cited at a D or a E on the next survey, it's a directed plan of correction and a discretionary DPNA and a $5,000 per instance CMP. When you look at that, I had no citations last year. I had one this year, and I just got a directed plan of correction. But the severity, and that's what Greg talked about in the background, the severity builds. So just for one citation, and then I'm cited at a D or an E, which are low-level citations, the penalty becomes very great. You have 45 days to demonstrate compliance. But if I'm cited at a level F with just one in the past year, it's a directed plan of correction and a DPNA and a $10,000 per instance CMP. That's critical because that automatically causes me to lose my nurse aid training program for 2 years. Now, I know that there's information or proposals to change some of that, and I certainly hope that they do that. But it's still in effect now. And then you have 45 days to demonstrate compliance. But the severity grows. If I've had 2 or more citations, now this is only at F880. If I've had 2 or more citations, and in the last 2 standard surveys, or the last 2 years, or twice in the last 2 years, it grows. It's a directed plan of correction, and every directed plan of correction includes the use of a root cause analysis. The DPNA, $15,000 per instance CMP, but there's a change here. CMS, or the state agency, can modify that. They can modify that to a per day CMP as long as the per day CMP total exceeds $15,000. So you're seeing a tremendous trend of the penalties are becoming more severe. Notice also that you now have only 30 days to demonstrate the compliance. If I'm cited at a level F with 2 or more deficiencies, it's a directed plan of correction, a discretionary DPNA, a $20,000 per instance CMP, or a per day CMP. It's up to the state survey agency, CMS, if they want to make it a per day. And then you have 30 days. So those are the deficiencies if I've had past deficiencies. These are on penalties. If I went from 0 to 1 to 2. But notice the difference when I get to the GHRI level. If I'm cited on the current survey, regardless of my past history, at a GHRI, it's a directed plan of correction, a discretionary denial of payment. But the enforcement remedies change. The penalties can be far more than just the CMP. The CMP bins are now determined by CMS using the CMP analytic tool. If you're a Team TSI client in the library, I believe it's in folder 10, QSO letters. Look for QSO letter 19-17, I believe. It is a letter that deals with the penalty structure, how they use the penalties, and how they address that. So it's a CMS at this point begins to impose different penalties. You still have 30 days to demonstrate compliance with the infection control. But if I'm cited at a JKRL, regardless of past history, I don't have to have any, whether I've had 0 or 2 or 3. It's a mandatory termination. I believe that Greg mentioned the 23-day fast track, and you're going to see that imposed here as well, or imposition of a temporary manager. It's an automatic loss of my nurse aid training program if either one of these are implemented. A directed plan of correction, the DPNA, and by the way, if a denial of payment for new admission is imposed, and we haven't corrected the deficiency within the time frame allowed for us, and that DPNA is imposed, an imposed denial of payment for new admissions is an automatic loss of the nurse aid training program. So we want to be sure that we're aware of that. It's an enforcement imposed by CMS location, and CMS is modifying changing the way that they handle certain enforcement requirements. Notice we use the term imposed by CMS location. They're eliminating the term regional office. You're not. That's going to be a thing of the past, beginning. I believe it's in October. A lot of the enforcement actions will no longer be handled by CMS. Termination, change of ownership, things like that don't deal with an actual survey will be handled by a QSO organization. So they're not going to call them regional offices. They're called CMS locations. That's the reason they put that in the memo 20-31. But notice here you only have 15 days. If you add the 15 days plus the 5 days, that's a 20-day time frame, because it doesn't take effect until 5 days after you receive the notice. So now you're at 20 days, but the mandatory termination, the fast track, is 23 days. So that particular enforcement, regardless of past history. So as we're looking at that, it's really critical for you to go back and study your previous infection control citations, especially F880. In the language, when you look at 20-31, it talks about for any associated deficiency, infection control deficiency. I wanted to know, what does that mean? There's a lot of tags that can be associated to infection control. So I sent CMS a text. They responded indicating that the enforcement remedies only apply to tag number F880. But when you look at that particular tag, it's about 14 different regulatory citations within that tag. So they are focusing on just F880. But if I would go back and look at my past survey compliance history, check to see if I've been cited for F880. If I have, take this information and look and try to determine where you may be on the next survey. And in a moment, we're going to look at a root cause analysis that will help you do that. But we want to look at the enforcement action for F884 and 885. And the reason we want to look at that is because this is where CMS is going to pull a lot of their survey information and who they're going to survey. So as we go through and look at that, oops, I hit the wrong button. Sorry. I have to go through that. QSA letter 20-29 requires the nursing homes to report their COVID information to CDC and to the residents. We're all familiar with that, and I'm doing that on a weekly basis, or if we've had additional cases within the week. But let's look at how that's done. Failure to report the data can result in an enforcement action. Now, F884 deals with reporting COVID cases to CDC. We do that every week. You're accustomed to doing that. But I want to show you how CMS uses the information. 884 is conducted off-site by CMS using the weekly data reported to CDC. You report the data on Sunday. On Monday, that information is provided to CMS. CMS looks at the information to identify two columns. The columns are, if the facilities identified are not reporting data timely, will receive a deficiency citation at an F level and a one-day CMP of $1,000. And that amount increases by $500 for each week data is not submitted. The latest information released by CMS as of July the 19th. That information will be updated again Thursday. There were 713 facilities that did not report data. There were 557 facilities that did not pass the quality check. Those deficiencies, those facilities received an automatic F-level citation automatically. Now that information is sent to the CASPER. And the reason for that, this is a federal survey. This is not a state agency survey. This is a federal survey because it's only done by CMS. They review the data. It's considered a federal survey. The independent IDR process is a federal survey. It's a desk review only. So what you have to look at is, and I would check this every day, I would look at my CASPER data file every day, and I would look at the EPOC. If you do not have an EPOC account with CMS, I encourage you to do that because that's how they are sending the information. It's placed in the EPOC account, which is Electronic Plan of Correction. So you want to look at that. So they take that information, and it's an automatic F level. When the survey team comes in to do a focus survey, they are checking compliance with F885, and that's done on site. And they will ask you for documentation that supports your notification of the families. How do you do that? And they will ask to see that. And if you don't have that, then you will be penalized for that as well. So we know that they use the F884 to identify particular problem areas. Now, we know that CMS and CDC have problems in accepting the data some, but you will have to, the only way that you can correct that is through an independent IDR, and that's only through the federal independent IDR. So let's look at how the COVID survey activities play a role in the infection control enforcement process. In addition to completing the focused infection control surveys of nursing homes, and CMS has completed the majority of those, had to have them all done by July 31st. They're about 99% completed with those. So those surveys have ended. So what they're looking for now is they're looking to implement the following activities. Perform on-site surveys within 3 to 5 days of identification of any nursing home with 3 or more new COVID cases, suspected or confirmed since the last report. Last week, or the last report on July 19th, there were 1,209 facilities that met that criteria. What the survey team does, and they will look at this one, or if there's only one confirmed resident case in a facility that was previously COVID-free, when you are looking at your COVID CDC data, the database that you are submitting and what's downloaded, CMS added 2 columns BE and BF. And those 2 columns contain this information. One column contains the 3 and the other one contains the 1. When that information is provided to CMS, CMS looks at those 2 columns. They in turn take that information for the 3 or more, there were 1,209 facilities, and for the COVID-free in the past, there were 434. That was the information that was posted last week for the period ending. So those facilities, the CMS sends that information to the state survey agency. The state survey agency has 3 to 5 days from the time that they get that information, from 3 to 5 days, to perform an on-site survey. And any deficiency that they find within that, especially with infection control, they will have these new enforcement remedies will apply. Starting October 1st, 20% of all surveys will have to be perform an annual focused infection control survey. Going back to what Greg said at the beginning, is that this is going to be here for a while. So 20% of all future surveys, annual surveys, will be a focused infection control. I'm going to give it back to Greg for a minute for him to show you a tremendous report that Team TSI has done to help you identify this criteria on this 3 and 1. Greg?
Thank you so much. So one of the things we did in response to this, because, again, the infection control citations, we've all, received them. They can be a little ubiquitous at times, but oftentimes they're also associated with different citations that are sort of like compounded. We're doing a pressure ulcer treatment and contaminated your field. You may get cited for the pressure ulcer and additionally get cited for the infection control practice. And again, of course, one of those associated things could be in response to reporting requirements. As you mentioned, F884 and 885 are both reporting either to residents and families and or to CDC NHSN sites. And that certainly could, depending on, the nature of the other portion of the survey, could result in an F880 tag being cited tangentially or compounded at the same time. So it's kind of vital to be aware of where your risks lie anytime you're going to come under scrutiny, anytime you're, just as you just mentioned, based on the NHSN reporting data, where you may have vulnerability to the Department of Health survey. So what we do is we created this COVID-19 NHSN report. It's in your portal under the COVID-19 tab, which basically takes the National Health Safety Network, the NHSN/CDC weekly submissions that are then published on Nursing Home Compare, and we take the data and compile it for your facility. So one thing I just want to be clear on is we are not performing any of the math calculations. We are simply taking the data that is present based on the submission information that was published on Nursing Home Compare and putting it into a format that makes it very simple and easy to see your performance, both for the last week submission or the reference weekly submission and cumulatively since the first of the year. So this just basically shows you that upper right-hand corner, there's 4 data elements up there that are extremely vital. Number one is if you have any facility missing data. Now, for this test facility or test company that we ran, there were none. Of course, if somebody failed to submit, you're automatically at that risk for the F884 tag at an F-level citation and civil money penalties that go along with that. And coinciding with that, if you've submitted but you failed the quality assurance check, you failed the QA check, that risk is still present. So we identified based on the information that was there whether or not you had any facilities that per NHSN failed to submit data for the relevant period and whether or not they failed the quality check. The other 2 items, again, that are sort of extrapolated or extracted from that table are facilities that have reported 3 or more suspected or confirmed cases. That's the number 11 you're seeing up there in the upper right-hand corner. That, along with facilities who are reporting their first initial confirmed case where they were previously COVID-free, which means they've never had COVID before in the building, they're now dealing with their first confirmed case. Those are those 2 situations you literally just went over that are going to result possibly within 3 to 5 days of on-site visit. And I would think, the one on the initial one would probably carry a heavier risk, associated with avoiding an outbreak or some type of significant event. So that's what we've basically done in the report, was take the information and compile it. We're showing the numbers that are there, the cases per 1,000 when it comes to confirmed, versus deaths versus percentage of deaths, all, we're not doing the calculation, all just pulled directly from the NHSN data, showing your weekly and your totals for staff and personnel, and then we've combined the two together, again, just taking the data from the table. And we do show something we call a spark line, shows you basically over the past 4 weeks, what is your trend in. So you can just sort of see if you're trending up or you're trending down. And you can also click on an average, which will show you average number of cases per facility, and you can see how your corporation or division or region or individual facility is comparing to national averages. And when we go to this report at the facility level, it includes the county and the state for the cases per thousand. So that could be relevant for if you're in the reopening phase. In phase 1, they're ready to move to phase 2. They want you to look at sort of the area you're operating in to see what the rates and trends have been. So we just recently released this and pulled it out. We did a couple of enhancements to it, but we update this immediately upon the release from NHSN to the Nursing Home Compare, and this data is viewable to you. It'll show you the CMS release date and the week ending date. Really strongly urge that you take a look at this. It's much easier than going through, 15,000 plus lines of code in the raw data form to try to find you a building. We've done that work for you, and we've tried to display it in a very simple and easy way that at a glance or drilling down into individual facilities or regions' performance, you have that capability at your fingertips. So just sort of highlight this NHSN report since it's still relatively new. And with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Dahlia will give me, am I back on the screen? I will be in just 1 second. Okay. That's a tremendous piece of information there, Greg. I really like how easy it is to see what my risks are. The expanded survey activities. Now that a lot of the facilities are going into phase 3, or the state may be into phase 3, or even if the state elects to, they can start doing other types of surveys. And what I wanted to show you is what they are about to start. And they can expand beyond the current survey. And what they're doing now is immediate jeopardy, focused infection control, initial survey, certification surveys. But this is what they want them to start looking at. Any complaint and investigation that are triaged as non-immediate jeopardy, GH&I. Any revisit surveys of any facility with a removed IJ but still out of compliance. Special focus facility and special focus facility candidate recertification surveys. By the way, this listing was just updated on July 29th. So I believe Team TSI provides that information. Recertification surveys that are greater than 15 months. As I stated earlier in the slide presentation of looking at the enforcement remedies, it talked about this year or standard surveys. So if they're greater than 15 months, CMS is going to make that priority. But let me show you the next slide is how they're going to pick these facilities. They're going to look at those with a history of noncompliance or allegations of noncompliance, your complaint surveys, based on these factors, abuse or neglect. So look at survey tags 600 through 610 or previous survey tags 221 through 226. Infection control. Even though it's focused on F880, I would look at others, especially 441, because that is the previous. And if you're beyond the 15-month criteria, your past history may show tag 441. So you want to make sure that you look at 441 as well. Violations of transfer or discharge requirements, 552, 623, these tags. However, waivers may apply. Under tag 552, currently, the requirement for advance notification and written notification has been waived. The time frame that you don't have to do it before you make the move because of the public health emergency. You still have to notify them, but the waiver is still in existence. So you may want to make sure that you consider that particular waiver as well. Insufficient staffing or competency. Here again, waivers may apply because of the requirement for certified nurse aides has been waived beyond the 4 months. That may apply. So be sure you consider that as you're looking at your potential risk and document those particular waivers to make sure that the state agency is aware of that as well. Other quality of care issues, for example, falls, F689 and F686 pressure ulcers. But what I wanted to mention here is that they only mention 2. It just says, for example, there are 17 quality of care tags. So you want to look at those, all of them. It says other quality of care issues. So there are 17 of those. So the priority of the survey process is going to be based on these as well as issues with tag F884. So be sure you look at that. The next thing we look at is just I want to show you just a second what the handouts are. There is I think there's 2 or 3 handouts that's there. Just like all of the sessions that we do, it has the PowerPoint presentation, has all the handouts, and in this particular one, they are linked, so you can get to them. They are bookmarked. Everything is bookmarked. So all of the handouts that we discuss are here. Everything that we have talked about is in this handout. And you'll find them extremely easy to maneuver. But the one that I want to spend just the last few minutes with is handout number 6. And it's a separate handout. If you've not downloaded that, I would encourage you to do that. This is a root cause analysis process that we have developed, hopefully, that will help you if you are cited for infection control. Now, this root cause analysis is strictly infection control. But what we've done with it, and let me increase it just a little bit. Put in Greg, he's the administrator, he doesn't know that yet, and Jill is clinical services, and all you have to do is just come in here and just start typing this information. Just click on it and type. So you first look at your citation history. Has the facility been decided? Yes. Well, if we haven't, you just click no. Then we take that one out. If I've addressed the resident or family council, it's going to prompt you to ask specific questions primarily to determine, has this been an issue in the past or is it a new issue? And so if you checked yes here and what date was it addressed, the date box has an automatic drop down. So you can just select any date and it automatically select the date. It asks questions, has it been to an independent or in IDR? Yes or no. And so it just asking some basic questions to look at as you start the process. The second part, survey tags and related compliance resources analysis. All of this information, these tags have a direct impact on infection control, or infection control has a direct impact on these tags. When you read the regulations at F880, every one of these tags are addressed. Doesn't mean that this tag caused the infection control citation. but infection control issue could have caused a citation at one of these. For example, involuntary seclusion. And CMS, by the way, does look at this when they're looking at your infection control practices. So I selected that. Also, we've identified the survey compliance resources. Here are the critical elements and other resources that are identified, that tag F880 is identified. For example, in the critical element dining observations, you need to look at critical element number 2. If you go to critical element number 2, it will ask about F880. In fact, it will, are we doing hand hygiene, etc. So what we've provided is the exact critical element number you need to look at. For example, 20054, which is one of your handouts, you would look at critical elements number 1 through 6. So this makes it a real easy, and you can just select the one you want to look at. You can add them here. I'm going to look at 603. I want to look at critical elements number 1 through 6. So that's the survey-related compliance. Gives you just a beginning process. We've also stated that citations in this tag at a scope and severity level of D or above may trigger an infection control survey and enhanced enforcement, what we just looked at. The regulatory compliance worksheet. These are the regulatory compliance parts of tag F880. There are 13 of them. So when you go to the regulations and you look at the different components, it's going to ask, this is a regulatory requirement. Has the facility established and implemented an infection control? Do I have written policies and procedures for prevention and control? All of those are regulatory requirements. So what I'm looking at here is, I'm not sure about this one. So I want to look at it, and I want to investigate it further. And to take them out, I can just click on them. This one was, did I update them annually? I'll just make sure. So I've got the information. Now what I want to look at is what are my identified issues? Well, we looked at and we saw involuntary seclusion. So I can type that in. All I have to do is just enter any number there. And then I can type in what the issue may be. Is this considered an isolated event, a pattern, or widespread? We're just going to indicate it's just a one-time for one individual. Do I take it to IDR, or can I resolve it without taking it, to my cooperative committee? So and here again, anywhere there's a date column, I can just click and it will put in the date. If I need to go further out, I can do that. I clicked on the wrong one. So I can enter any date that I need to do that. So this one has 5 different problem areas that you can address and you can look at. But the next page is, okay, I've got the 5 particular areas that I want to look at identified. But now I need to prioritize them. And how do I do that? This sheet lets you do that. So first problem was involuntary seclusion relative to unnecessary isolation. And I have these scoring columns: prevalence, what's the risk to the residents, how often did the family respond. But what's neat about this column, if whatever data that I put here, if I put that this is a level 4, notice when I hit tab, it automatically changes the value. So whenever you change a value, it automatically will total the score. So if I have 3 particular issues, I can look and see what score is the highest. it may be that if number 3 or number 1 was the highest, if I resolve that issue, I probably have resolved many other issues. Now we get into the root cause analysis. I've identified the problem. Involuntary seclusion relative to unnecessary isolation. Now I begin the process of identifying and correcting the problem. And what these 2 pages will do is get you to think about where the problem lies. For example, if the facility has been cited at F80 in the past 24 months, compare the citation data and plan a correction. If I have been cited for it before and I have this issue again, are there any similarities to what was the issue before and what it is now? So you can type in very easy anything where there's a blue box. You can type the data in. Have I been cited for any of these tags? Was an investigation conducted? What kind of systems were could be an issue? Was it a human factor, communication, culture, attitude, competency? Was it rules and regulations? So what this is allowing you to do is probes to consider and identifying the root cause. And it goes through all of the questions and the responses. So when you finish that, and it's a 2-page, and it's very easy to do. For example, has the staff participated in an infection control program? If they've not, why? It may be that they were under quarantine when the training program was conducted. Have you scheduled the date? Here again, it's got a drop-down menu. So all of the questions guide you into determining and identifying what the root cause is. And then this sheet provides information on additional data that you want to consider. And once you do all of that, you've got to follow up. So the corrective action plan, there's a follow-up record. And here again, we've got the data, and you select. It helps you you don't have to answer every question, but it does help you. If the survey team is there, you've been cited for infection control, you've got to submit a plan of correction or a root cause analysis. The purpose of this is help you do that. Doesn't mean that it replaces anything you have. I do want to share this in closing about this particular process. When at the end of it, go back to the first screen, you can do a save as, you can do a print document, but if you want to clear the document, you want to save the document and call it something else. You want to call it F880 root cause analysis. You can do that through the save as, or you can print it. But instead of having to go through and take this out and delete all that, just hit reset form, and it will clear every field in that form. And so you have even if you save it as the same thing, when you open the form up, just hit reset form and start with a new form. Be sure to do a save as. But one of the things that we are working on is once we completed this particular process, we realized that we needed to develop this in a little bit better format, in that we will be providing more drop-down menus. It will also have a process where when you fill in the problem, identify the problem, it will automatically populate every field that asks that question. So you only have to do it one time. However, if you want to change the problem once you get there, all you do is just click on the text box and you can change the particular text in the problem. But it will automatically populate different areas, which will be a big time saver for you. So I hope you will find this form useful. It's also, you can print it and you can use it manually if you want to. These blue boxes will not print when you print the document out. The blue boxes will not print. So Daya, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those, or Greg. So,
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Greg. That was outstanding. I think a lot of great information. We have had some questions throughout, but I believe that they are all answered. I'm checking to see if there's anything else open. For those of you that were not aware, the handouts that Hugh has gone over, they are available on your GoToWebinar panel. We've also included them in your follow-up emails from GoToWebinar. So when you get a follow-up email here, I believe tomorrow, it will include the recording and it will include these handouts. And your reminder email did include the handouts also. And if for some reason you're having trouble downloading any of those, please feel free to reach out to support@teamtsi.com or training@teamtsi.com, and we are happy to send over those handouts. So anything else, Greg and Hugh, that you would like to add?
Nothing from Greg. Thanks
for
so
all
much.
you do.
Ditto.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention. And we are here to assist you in any way we can. And thank you so much, Hugh. That was outstanding. Bye-bye, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you on another Team TSI webinar.
Thank you.